You may have heard the saying, hate is a strong word. The word hate itself is described as intense or passionate dislike. When it's phrased like that, I can see why there is hate for Spider Man Miles Morales. Maybe you think Miles is a fake Spider Man. Maybe the narrative is too boring. Or maybe you think it's an overpriced DLC. No game is perfect, and even when you already have great features from the previous game, you get hate when you reuse them, even though I'm a believer if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Sure, there are a lot of similarities between Spider Man PS4 and Spider Man Miles Morales. I mean, it does take place in the same city. But is that a reason to hate Spider Man Miles Morales? Even though it's just a minor change, adding in the wintertime snow creates a fresh environment so that the city isn't stale. The people, the sounds, the traffic, walking the streets as Miles Morales, well, more realistically, swinging very low. If you're walking, you're probably doing something wrong. It feels exactly how it would if you stood in New York City right now. Towering buildings, busy streets, full of people. The city that never sleeps does exactly that. The game takes a more modern approach to the neighborhood of Miles Morales, showing off the unique style Miles has as Spider Man. Insomniac did a great job implementing Miles' culture, whether that's the way he swings, the way he fights, or even just the way he walks. If you played Spider Man PS4, you will quickly notice the reused locations around the city. There's bound to be some locations that are the same since it is the same city, but I would have liked for them to be more unique with their approach. Obviously, landmarks, other city based locations like parks should not and cannot be changed, but some of the areas the underground used were the same exact spots the Fisk gang used. They did give the locations small tweaks instead of completely copy and pasting, but overall, it wasn't big enough changes to feel a real difference. Yes, logically, the underground using the abandoned Fisk gang locations does make sense, but maybe throw a new twist on it, spice it up a little bit. Speaking on copy and paste, the UI is almost the exact same from Spider Man PS4 with a more modernized style. I think the overall map design and tabs to change suits and upgrades is one of the easiest to understand parts of the game, so I'm glad they decided to keep it in. Too many times I see games changing something that doesn't need to be changed. Call of Duty, I'm talking to you. Please just give us back Dead Silence as a perk. Also, can we appreciate how great Insomniac has done with the suit designs? There are 20 suits in total, which is less than half of the suits we got in Spider Man PS4, but out of the 20 suits, the only two I didn't enjoy were the Spider training suit, which is locked behind New Game Plus, and the Purple Rain suit, which I know I'm in the minority of not liking, so that's a pretty good amount of success in the suit designs. I'm not too familiar with Miles' most popular suits in the comics, so there could be ones I don't know about that they left out, but to me, the ones we got were awesome. The suits did a great job of showing off Miles' swagger, something that he carries around with him the whole game. And with web swinging being the most important feature of any Spider Man game, I'm glad Insomniac took the time to make marginal improvements to the system. Whereas Peter is very precise with his movements, it's obvious he's been doing it for a while. Miles is very much still flying by the seat of his pants and enjoying the process. Early on, it does seem Miles has problems even landing smoothly, which I thought was a cool wrinkle to show he has not yet perfected being Spider Man. The controls are just as easy to learn as the 2018 game, except the animations have been updated to show off Miles' more stylish approach to swinging, which shows off his character's personality. Most of the animations while swinging are nothing to write home about, but the dive animations talk about a dopamine rush. Pulling out your phone while falling or posing for the camera is something I would want to do if I was 17 and came across spider powers, so I praise Insomniac for adding those animations in, even if they did take it straight from the Spider Verse movie. The comfortability of swinging around New York City is easy to grasp. Within an hour or two of the game, I felt as if I already perfected the swing mechanics. I know for some, they may want a larger skill gap for the swinging, but I'm a believer the swinging should be entry level for anyone to enjoy. I found myself skipping fast travel most of the time and instead swinging from place to place. I would like for there to be more depth or more fixes moving forward regarding things like glitching up and floating instead of running off the ground, or being able to run down the side of a building instead of only side to side or up. I would also like to see a pendulum where the web does not release until I release R2, allowing me to swing back and forth. I think this would also fix the problem of constantly holding R2 the whole time while you're swinging, because right now there's no reason to release the button as you can launch with X to gain speed anyways. And you can attach with R2 without ever needing to release. So without that, it almost becomes an automated swing system. I do believe the traversal also benefits the style of open world quests and activities we can complete. Spider Man Miles Morales is very much an engaging open world. There's side quests, challenges, random crime, and more that you come across in the city. In some ways, the side quests helped flesh Miles into a more complete character than the main story. I really enjoy the idea of a friendly neighborhood app in which citizens can request Spider Man's help. Sure, some of the missions don't bring real value, like Miles going to take a selfie with a citizen, but I felt like Miles was helping people on a personal level, which is who Spider Man really is. And the side content also pays off in the main story as well. If you choose to skip the side quests, you may wonder why the citizens react in certain situations the way they do. Once you realize Miles helped them beforehand, it makes a lot more sense. The only thing I could really critique with side quests is the length and that there was no in depth villain side quest. I guess that's to be expected in a game with only 9 total side missions. Luckily, Insomniac was able to pad the replay value by utilizing the random crime that we had in Spider Man 2018 as well. Just like his mentor Peter Parker, Miles will see random crime constantly going on as he swings about the city. While the random crimes are still far from perfect, they are a necessary part of any Spider Man game to help increase the immersion into the world. Insomniac took some steps in the right direction to make the activities more varied and less of a chore. Multiple new crimes were added into the game from its predecessor, whether it was chasing down a group of thugs as they flee the scene of a crime, or following a trail of hacked leaderboards from the Tinkerer led underground faction. In every district, you also only need to complete each random crime once rather than the 5 times each like in Marvel's Spider Man. That significantly lowers the repetitive nature of the random crime, which leaves the decision more up to the player. Now, side quests and random crime are not the only things you have to do in New York City. There's postcards, sound samples, time capsules, underground caches, spider training, rocks on labs, and underground hideouts. This may seem like a ton of content, but it's not a lot when you break it down. Whereas Spider Man 2018 had a lot more bloat when it came to open world content, Miles Morales simplifies the content to fit in better with the pacing of the game. The postcards are an 8-piece scavenger hunt where each clue will unlock the next postcard location. There are 10 locations for the sound samples where you need to match up your sound with the noise you are searching for. Probably my least favorite activity. Luckily, there are only 10, so they don't take up too much time to complete. The 16 time capsules are replacements for Peter's backpacks in the first game. To find the time capsules, you simply find the spot on the map and interact with the item. These are small collectibles Miles and Finn left across the map years earlier. I'm not sure how these time capsules would still be there after all these years in New York City, but whatever, I guess. The underground caches are unique to Miles' journey. To be honest, they are only there to give you material to craft more suits and upgrade more gadgets. I don't mind them as they do at least give you rewards that I wanted in terms of the suits. And if you don't want more suits or unlocks, then you can just ignore them altogether. If you want side activities with actual challenges and combat, you will want to take on the training, rocks on labs, and underground hideouts. The spider trainings are the most interesting of the 3 for me. The challenges are different versions of the Taskmaster challenges from Spider Man 2018. Not only do they allow for the player to get more familiar with the mechanics while trying to also beat the time limits, the The challenges also unlock gameplay bonuses for completing each of the challenges, which will give you more upgrades in each of the three respective categories. Out of the three categories, I rank stealth as the lowest only because the enemies start in the same spot on every try. So if you want to beat the best time, it really becomes memorization more than adapting in the moment. I guess the same can be said for the traversal challenges as well, but I think I have higher hopes for stealth encounters. I would rank the challenges as a downgrade from the 2018 game mainly because they don't come equipped with Taskmaster mini boss fights. I feel like the hologram vulture fight is a bit of a downgrade as it's basically the same fight from the first game without Electro. Either way, I enjoyed doing the challenges. The Roxxon Labs and Underground are both very similar in that you travel to the location on the map, take out the enemies with either combat or stealth, or a mix of both. The only real difference is after defeating the enemies. For the Underground, you will disable a jammer with your Venom powers, and for the Roxxon Labs, you will have the choice to disable a reactor. If what you're looking for is more combat besides the main quest, then these are going to be very fun. You will also be rewarded for your effort with both activity and tech tokens. The token system may be the biggest upgrade from Spider-Man 2018 to Spider-Man Miles Morales. In Spider-Man 2018, there were 6 different tokens used to unlock upgrades outside of the skill tree. In Miles Morales, they narrowed that down to 2 different types of tokens. That means as a player, you get way more control over the type of content you choose to complete. In Spider-Man 2018, the same gadget could have 5 different combinations of tokens needed to upgrade, which meant you were forced to do every single type of content, which leads to more unenjoyment if you were forced to do something you hated. In Miles Morales, you could leave content like time capsules alone if you wanted because you can earn the activity tokens through other content you found more enjoyable. To me, this was an underappreciated change that went unnoticed. Maybe it's because there are less gadgets to upgrade and suits to buy, but I found the tokens to be less of a hassle to get. I did feel a bit underwhelmed with the selection of gadgets and mods in the game. I understand there are less because the game is smaller overall, but the ones in Spider-Man 2018 were just so much cooler. Whether it was the Iron Spider, being able to rapidly regenerate focus, or even knock out enemies with one punch. The mods in this game either give you more time with your powers or less damage coming dealt to you. There's not a lot of variation to play with, and I ended up forgetting they even existed. That could be a cause of Insomniac wanting to simplify the combat system a bit more, or because Miles got more upgraded powers with his Venom powers. I preferred more web attacks like we had in Spider-Man 2018 compared to the Venom attacks in Miles Morales. For the story of the first 2 games, it does make sense. Peter, being around for a lot longer, uses his webs and gadgets to his advantage, whereas Miles, being newer and having these crazy bioelectric powers he's getting, chooses to punch his way out of most fights while using the bioelectric powers. The base combat mechanics are extremely like that of the first game. You have the kick up into an air combo, or punch and slide between the legs, which do a pretty good amount of damage. You will still use your spidey senses to dodge the attacks, with the more perfect dodges giving you better openings to attack. You can also web enemies to the ground or walls, which I tend to use a lot. With the new Venom powers, there was a larger focus on more AoE attacks. The combat went away from the gadget and finisher focused combat to more of an ability focused combat. The only thing I didn't like about the Venom powers is being forced to use them to defeat certain enemy types. I believe the combat system should be free flow where I can choose how I want to attack instead of being forced to use Venom Dash or Venom Strike. Incorporating the Venom abilities into my free flow combos felt a lot more rewarding. Having to spam a specific ability breaks up the rhythm of combat, especially if you save up for the ultimate, which KOs just about everyone. All moves should have a reason to exist in combat. The best combat systems are the ones that encourage you to use every move in the arsenal. There's hundreds of ways to attack enemies in this game, But although they look cool, there's only a handful of moves that are the most useful. Mixing up the attacks is more for the player's experience, not because it improves the way of doing things. The real skill comes from being able to perfect your dodges and utilizing the venom powers to take out the larger, more difficult enemies. To use the venom powers, you will need to pay attention to your focus bar. This is not only the way you use powerful abilities, but the way you also regain health. Because Miles has such low health in this game, even on normal difficulty, it's important to pay attention to the bar and time your dodges. The only exception to the rule is in New Game Plus. In New Game Plus, you can unlock the skill Bioelectric Instincts, which triggers right before a fatal hit at no cost. It's basically a get out of free card. It heals you all the way back to full health and takes out the enemies. If the ability was able to be upgraded early on, I would have a major problem with it, but because it is locked behind a New Game Plus, if you want to use it for New Game Plus, go for it. The ideal way to implement it would be to up the difficulty level on your second playthrough while upgrading the skill. That way you can challenge yourself but help yourself in situations you may get overwhelmed. Miles Morales utilized the same environmental aspects of the first game as well, making just about anything be able to be picked up and chucked around. This is a great use of crowd control that always looks great. The environmental aspects you either knock over or drop on the enemies is a one-hit KO, which I really like to use especially during stealth. Enemies, especially those with range weapons, will not stop attacking when you go to pick up the objects, so you need to time when you pick up the object or make sure you release it early, that way you can avoid the damage. I feel this is a good risk-reward system, which keeps the objects from being completely overpowered. My only critique is that it was almost a copy and paste from Spider-Man 2018. There was no big upgrades to the environmental system. I was hoping they would make some changes with what we could do with objects once picking them up, because at times swinging in a circle does get a bit boring. I guess they decided that focusing on the stealth of Miles Morales was way more important than a few new animations. I feel like Miles Morales was made more for stealth and style, whereas the first Spider-Man game was made to touch on everybody's childhood dreams. Gameplay wise, the wall and ceiling takedowns are a huge improvement to stealth gameplay. It's just something that makes sense. The game does follow the layout of the first game, where going around taking out snipers first, then worrying about the people on the ground is the best way to defeat the enemies. I don't find this to be a real problem. That's just common sense to take out the snipers first. The only questionable mechanic is the ability to turn invisible. This felt like a cheap way of getting out of mistakes where you could return to stealth at any moment. For the players who would rather stay stealth than fight large group of enemies, I guess it could be a great feature, but it feels more rewarding when you are forced to make every right decision to not alert the enemies rather than just go invisible and zip away. There were times I was debating between finding an angle for a perch takedown or just hitting the enemy with a web strike takedown. I like the challenge of deciding when and where is appropriate to use each takedown and where you could take risk. I appreciate that in Miles Morales you could stealth run a whole enemy hideout. In Spider-Man 2018, you would take out the first wave in stealth, then the second wave would come around and force you into combat. That goes back to the ability to make your own choices in the game. I prefer to make the choice myself depending on the situation rather than being forced right into combat every time. If you're a player who wants to play as Spider-Man and use every combo in your arsenal, then I think you should enjoy the combat. Whether it's stealth or beating down enemies with abilities, you do get a lot of control of how you attack the situations. I've played through the story a few times now, and I'm still not bored of the combat. I don't find myself overusing any one ability, turning the game into a spam fest, or only waiting for an enemy to attack before I counter. Whether or not it's the most useful, there is creativity encouraged through combat with the different ways you can approach the situations. Whether you focus on AoE, stealth, or just swinging around with guns and objects. The only time in the game that does not encourage freedom are the boss fights. There are only 3 real boss fights in the game. Rhino you fight twice, Prowler, and Tinkerer. The first Rhino fight is used at the introduction of the game. It's a tutorial boss, so it's not very hard. My biggest problem is that each of the boss fights follow the same mechanics. The first Rhino boss fight was most fun when I was chasing him through the city. Once it became a tutorial of how to use the Venom Punch, it just didn't do much for me. The mechanics were very easy. Dodge Rhino's charges, use the Venom Punch to knock him down, follow it up with a few punches every time. After a few minutes, the fight will be over. The second Rhino boss fight was very similar to the first fight. Dodge Rhino, jump on his back, and run him into takes, at which point you can attack a few times to start knocking off the armor. The second part of the boss fight had Rhino throwing tanks at us, which then would set objects next to us to throw back at him. The goal was to throw the objects at Rhino to stagger him. Once again, follow up with your Venom abilities and attacks, and a few times, boom, it's over. The Prowler boss fight followed the same style. Because Prowler would teleport away or turn invisible, you need to hit a perfect dodge to web Prowler, then you follow up with your Venom attack to not allow him to teleport away for a few seconds. I didn't like the pacing of this fight. Because I needed to hit a perfect dodge to attack, I ended up spending time waiting around for the attack to come in before I could do anything. On top of being in a boring subway station, the fight didn't make for much of a spectacle in my eyes. The fourth and final boss fight of the game is against the Tinkerer. The battle is divided into 4 different stages, separated by a cutscene. All 4 stages of the fight are similar. Tinkerer just gets stronger weapons every round and more abilities. The first phase, you need to just dodge the sword attacks and wait for your opening to dive in. You can use your finisher as well as knock her up, which is a nice change for a boss fight. The second phase was the easiest for me. Tinkerer now has a gun that she fires twice before slamming the ground, but I was able to get in an attack before the 2 gunshots were finished. There was also a sword and shield during the stage, but it went so quickly I didn't notice. The third stage consists of dodging Tinkerer's attacks and webbing the turrets that she places down around the area. You then have an opening to attack a few times before she pushes you back with her shield and moves to another area and repeats. Do a couple of combos on her to get to stage 4, where now she has these purple death wheels she will throw at you. Like the other fights, you want to wait for your opportunities to dodge before you web in and engage in a combo. Towards the end, this will be obvious by a big triangle above the Tinkerer's head as she tires out. Unfortunately, every boss ended up feeling the same. I was expecting more of an improvement in this regard from the first game. Most enemies only have one way to damage them per phase, but the overall fights looked great and played into the story great. Sure, the actual combat wasn't the best in these fights, but I enjoyed them nonetheless. For me, because of the amount of content outside of boss fights, I never felt bored in the fights. I wasn't forced to do 10 different pointless battles inside of a 6-hour story. Instead, they made sense of where they were placed. Unfortunately, that's where the good part of the story ends. The story follows Miles still fresh into his Spider-Man duties. While taking down Rhino with Peter in the beginning of the game, he unlocks his bioelectric abilities. While adapting to his new role while Peter leaves on vacation ever so conveniently, Miles uncovers a new crime organization called the Underground. When Miles returns home for Christmas dinner, he finds that his old best friend Finn has also been invited. So many coincidences already. Then Miles attends a rally for his mom where the Underground attacks and Miles finds out they want the new form. In stopping them from getting the new form, Miles finds out his so conveniently placed best friend Finn is the Tinkerer. After finding out that Finn's motive is related to the death of her brother Miles, he tries to reason with Finn, but after failing, he decides to tell her he is Spider-Man. After that, Roxxon abducts both Finn and Miles with the help of Miles' uncle, the Prowler. After Finn and Miles escapes, Miles realizes he must stop Finn. He's then kidnapped by his uncle and forced to defeat him. After confronting Finn and not being able to reason with her, Miles is forced to fight her before the reactor goes critical. Miles then absorbs all the energy but is not able to contain it, so Finn sacrifices herself to save Harlem. A few citizens of Harlem find out Miles' identity but chose to keep it a secret. 4 weeks later, Simon Krieger is arrested and Miles' uncle Aaron turns himself in. Peter then returns and praises Miles for taking care of it all by himself. That's the outline of the story. I have some major problems with the plot and characters I need to talk about. First is Finn. That's it, just Finn. I think you understand. No, seriously, I understand it's tough to make a Miles Morales game in general because most of his villains are Peter Parker villains, and for this game, I think they wanted to not use the Peter Parker villains and wanted to use villains specific for Miles since it was his origin game. But Finn is seriously unlikable. She's selfish, destructive, basically wants to kill innocent people, but somehow they want us to feel bad for her. I think a major problem is we didn't get to know Finn. They gave us no reason to truly root for her before she went evil. The first time we met her was at Christmas dinner, and the second time is when we found out she's the Tinkerer. I mean, that doesn't sell me on her being good in heart. On top of that, she not only bombs her best friend's mom's rally, but completely goes insane and ignores all logic, even though she's apparently super smart. She gives out dangerous weapons to criminals like Candy. It was like she was trying to maximize the number of casualties, because if all she wanted was Simon Krieger dead, she could have just killed him at that point. So when she's completely blinded by rage, it doesn't make much sense to the player. Evident from the ending, there is enough information on Krieger to put him away, so why not just stop and do it the legal way? It's not like you were trying to kill him anyways. The only thing Tinker was trying to do is destroy the new form to show how bad it was. Even to the very end, they try to get you to like her by making her give her life to save the city. I mean, a bit late, don't you think? Also, how is she so strong? Miles gained superpowers. You're telling me because Finn is good with technology, she can go toe-to-toe with people like Spider-Man within a few months? I mean, is that not crazy? Maybe these crazy powers we were never told about is how she escaped Roxxon the first time after her brother was killed, because that still makes no sense. I would have preferred a more in-depth story of Miles and the Prowler, with Simon Krieger as the second big bad, like his role in this game. The emotional tie between Aaron and Miles is more riveting because he is a family member, and Prowler trying to get him to go to the dark side early in his crime fighting days makes for a better origin story in my personal opinion. I like the premises of Miles' new home and protecting his neighborhood, but the plot needed some reworking if it was going to be compelling. Another problem was none of the characters being fully fleshed out, which I feel is because of the length of the game. There's only so much story you can tell in 7 hours. They needed another 4 to 5 hours to really put this story together. That could help flesh out a bit more of Krieger, Finn, Miles, and any one of the other characters that were pretty surface level. There was also a lot of unresolved plot holes, like Uncle Aaron having a mission where he gives Miles a suit, but then he wants him to stop being Spider-Man. Or in the museum flashback, why was the project in some room you had to pay for, but then when you go up there, no one's there? And there's just no way the creators of the project can't go see their own project if that is the case. I would have liked to see more time of Miles outside the suit building connections as well. I feel as if I learned just as much about him in the first game than I did in his own game. I really enjoyed the parts strolling the streets through the neighborhood and talking with citizens. I mean, in 2018 Spider-Man, we got to run away from Rhino as Miles and go through the rubble to find his dad lying dead. Those are deeper moments than anything we got in this game. I would have liked to see a few puzzles we got like in 2018 as well. I know everyone was not a fan, but I enjoy puzzles. The best part of the story was the presentation. Just as 2018 Spider-Man, the character models are great. The voice acting is good for the most part, and the set pieces are amazing to look at. They were limited in what they could do because of the size of the game, but because it was a smaller scale game, they were not able to waste time padding time or story. If I was comparing Miles Morales to 2018 Spider Man, I would take 2018 every time. But it's to be expected for a game that is double the size. I would have liked to see more cutscenes or missions fighting through the city like the 2018 Spider Man game instead of more hideout based missions that we did. My favorite mission was the Battle for Harlem, where Miles had to fight through a snowstorm, taking down enemies along the way, finally getting to Roxxon Plaza, where we faced the Tinkerer. That was the most immersed I felt while playing Miles Morales by far. The Endgame is a part of the game that is extremely important to the more hardcore fans, and Miles Morales delivered. I've now played this game 3 times, beat every open world objective, collected every item, and platinum the game. I can honestly say it's one of the most enjoyable open worlds I've played along with Spider-Man 2018. Whether it's unlocking more suits or just stopping random crime, there is still a ton to do once the story ends. Once you return to your apartment and rest, you will be able to find the postcards your mother left around the city. You are still able to complete any of the other side missions or content you did not complete before finishing the game. It helps that you're swinging around the city as Spider-Man, which I say most people, that's what they want to do anyways. On top of New Game Plus, which is a staple of most games now, you are also able to choose to replay a specific mission if you don't want to play the whole game through again. I think that needs to be added to more games. If you want to switch a suit, hop back into a mission to get some photos, or just do the boss encounters with different setups or different suits, it's a really easy way to do it without having to replay the whole game. So why do people hate Spider-Man Miles Morales? Well, there's a few reasons. The price being $49.99 for a 7-hour story was a bit short, and some people considered it to be an expensive DLC. I get that, and honestly, I think making this a DLC of Spider-Man 2018 with a brand new character and abilities was definitely possible, and I'm sure it was even considered. They did put a lot of time and effort into the game, so I try not to be too harsh unless the pricing is ridiculous. They did lower the price from $69.99, which is the normal pricing for a PlayStation 5 game, so it is still lower $20. The story itself being boring and not engaging also made some players upset, hoping for a more unique and interesting story than the one we had. That's fair. The ending did leave a bad taste in some players' mouths, but although it wasn't my favorite story, it didn't ruin my experience. Others also complained about the map being too similar. I think that's a little bit of a bad take. If that's the only reason you hate it, then honestly, I can't see where you're coming from. Although I would consider 2018 Spider-Man to be the better game overall, it's no doubt Insomniac learned and improved Miles Morales in a lot of ways from the first game. And I think that is worth some praise. We're in an era where gaming companies like to add in every suit behind paywalls, add in battle passes, and I think Insomniac did a pretty good job in the fact that they gave us the full game at launch. If you genuinely didn't like the story and felt cheated, and that's why you don't like the game, I totally understand. But let me ask you, if the game was a DLC and let's say it was $10 to $15 cheaper, would you enjoy it instead of hating it? If that is the case, then I don't necessarily believe the hate is warranted, because unless you are a day one purchaser of every game, which is your own choice, you could have waited to see how long it was and then just buy it at a discount, because every game goes on discount. And as always, I would love to hear your opinions down in the comment below. Drop a like if you did enjoy the video. Check out my other videos critiquing other games, and as always, I will see you next time.